What's up, guys? I'm Jake Savage, and welcome to the Grow Savagely podcast. In this show, we break down and discuss the three most important elements needed for success: leadership, influence, and savage growth. On today's episode, I wanted to take some time to break down a theme that I've noticed across each of my guest episodes so far. And that theme is rejection, right? So if you've watched those episodes, at one point or another, you'll notice that these successful people were hit with some type of roadblock, but they found a way to navigate through it. And I believe that knowing how to navigate past objections or rejection in the heat of the moment is one of the most important skills that any of us can have. And if you think also that this only pertains to salespeople and you're about to check out, I just want you to hang tight for a second, right? Because I truly believe that all of us are selling something, whether it's why you deserve a raise, from your boss, or maybe you're trying to sell an interviewer on why you deserve the job, or maybe you're just trying to sell somebody on why they should go on a date with you. I mean, there are countless examples of how this plays out in our everyday life. And so today, I want to show you how to get past objections. But first, if you haven't been here before, I want to welcome you. And if you like what you hear today, I would love to ask you to subscribe to the podcast. And if you really like what you hear today, please share it with someone who you think would benefit. And in my opinion, I would say that that's probably anybody with a pulse. So keep an eye out for somebody like that. So to start, before we dive into the tips that I've got for you on how to move past objections, I wanted to start off with why it's okay in the first place to move forward. Because a lot of us believe at our core that it's rude or disrespectful to push forward after we've been told no. And a lot of us think that maybe that's only reserved for old, slimy, used car salespeople or whatever, but that's definitely not the case. I believe that it's not only appropriate, but it's our responsibility to move forward. I'll go into that, but I believe it's our responsibility to move forward after we've been told no. So to start, most of us have been conditioned, I believe, to shut down anytime we hear no. And I think that this began back when we first started talking. I mean, our parents told us no, then we had our teachers telling us no, and then we had people we were interested in telling us no. And then if you're me, you had college applications telling you no, then you had job interviews where you heard no. I mean, we've heard this from anybody and everybody, and most of us have never tested the limits. We've never tried to push past that. And because we've never tried, we've never experienced what it's like to continue past hearing no and reach a yes. So therefore, we just naturally shut down every time we hear no. Okay, thanks, appreciate it, got what I needed. Maybe I'll try next time if I'm feeling better about it, right? I mean, that's most of us in the heat of the moment. That's our natural inclination. Say thanks, go ahead and move on, right? Feel sorry for yourself. And I think we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people saying no to get a better understanding first in order to know why it's okay to move forward. And most of us will say no to things when we lack knowledge on the subject, right? Or on the matter. So when you lack knowledge on a subject, that creates room for feelings like fear, doubt, and anxiety, right? I think I just watched one of the Batman movies the other day, and this villain, he said it perfectly. Oh, it was the mob boss down underneath the bridge. He said, "You always fear what you don't understand." And that plays out exactly in today's episode. You fear what you don't understand. And when we don't understand something and we feel those feelings of fear, it's just easier for us to say no, right? And save face rather than risk looking like an idiot, as in you're not following them or you don't quite get it. It's also quicker because rather than to spend an undetermined amount of time trying to become more educated on a subject, you just say no, right? No thanks, too expensive, can't afford it, not interested, whatever it may be. We just say no and we shut down. And when you're on the receiving end of that, you take it and you move on, right? So I want to talk about why it's okay to move forward. And I think the best way to do that is through a story that happened to me a few years back, right? This is a story about a salesperson that I've been more impressed with than anybody I've ever met in terms of sales in my whole life. But it was back when I was in Durango, Colorado, and I was in door-to-door sales at the time. So I needed some new walk-in shoes. So I walk into the store, tell the guy that I'm looking for walk-in shoes, and he takes me to the back wall. By the way, I think this guy's name was Brian. I can't really remember. But he takes me to the back wall. He pulls a pair of shoes off. They're $200. And right off the bat, I shut him down. Said, no way. I'm not spending I'm $100 max, man, but I'm not spending $200 today. Trying to spend way less than that. And this is where most salespeople would have shut down. Right? I told him I wasn't spending $200. I wanted to spend $100 or less. So an average or weak salesperson would have said, okay, showed me a $100 pair of shoes and then maybe a cheaper and cheaper and cheaper pair of shoes till I finally said yes to one of them. That requires no skill or effort, by the way, but that's what most people probably would have done. So this is why I love Brian, and I'm going to find out to make sure if that's his real name. But Brian did not shut down. Instead of moving on to a cheaper pair of shoes, he said, hey, no problem. Totally get that. Just curious, Jake, what do you do for work? Started asking me about my job. He started asking me about what I do for fun on the weekends and any hobbies that I have. And then he started asking me about any pain that I experience. Do I have back pain, hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, all this stuff. Said yes to all of them. I've always been like the old geezer out of all my friends. I've got all kinds of pain. And asking me about my sleep habits then. And after he asked me questions for about 15 minutes, he took me over to a section of the store that had a pressure pad so he could see the arches in my feet. And then he had me get on a treadmill so he could film my gait just to see how I walked. So after about all of this, he says, man, I've got the perfect pair for you. I said, awesome, let's go. We walk over to the back wall with all those shoes. He pulls off the same freaking $200 pair of shoes and hands them to me. And I was like, dude, I just told you I'm not buying these shoes. And he said, Jake, you told me that you're tired during the day. Well, you're tired during the day because you're not getting enough sleep. And you're probably not getting good sleep because you've got a lot of back pain. Well, the reason that you've got back pain is because that's above your hips, which are above your knees, which are above your ankles. You see where I'm going here? And he says at the base of all these joints are your feet, right? So the current shoes that you've got aren't providing enough support, and it causes a chain reaction all the way up to your back. And that's what's causing you to not get good sleep and to not feel rested during the day. Oh, and by the way, your right foot has zero arch because that's the foot you use to push when you're skateboarding. I mean, I was blown away. I didn't even have anything to say in response to the guy. I mean, he had sized me up so perfectly, but also did an excellent job of getting to the root of a massive problem, in my life. So yeah, I took the shoes. And then before we checked out, he walked me over to another wall filled with insoles. Seriously. Then he pulls off the most expensive pair of insoles, which were $50. And he says, hey, you're going to need these to fix that flat arch in your right foot so that you can realign all of those joints, because that's one of the issues as well. So what do you think I did? Yeah. I bought the freaking insole. I spent $250 that day, by the way. And I had only intended to spend $100. So I spent more than double what I had originally intended. Not only that, I left the store ecstatic because I was going to hopefully fix the pain that I experienced and then sleep better and then feel better, right? So here are 2 points from the story that I need to address. First, Brian empowered me with the right knowledge to make the right decision. Okay? He wasn't greedy. He may have had a commission check on his mind, which is fine. He deserves it. I got the better end of the deal. I don't know how much his commission was. It probably wasn't that much off a $250 pair of shoes. But even if he made $500 commission off that pair of shoes, I got the better end of the deal because I stopped having pain. I was able to sleep better. I felt better over the course of months and months and months, right? So he wasn't greedy, and he cared about me enough to ask me all these questions about my life and to get to know me better, right? So key point, before I drag on too far, is he empowered me with the right knowledge to make the right decision. Okay, second key point here. At no part in the story was Brian selling me a pair of shoes. I didn't pay $250 that day for some cloth and rubber for my feet. I paid $250 that day to rid myself of pain, to sleep better, and then to feel better. Right? So point number one, Brian empowered me with the right knowledge to make the right decision. Point number two, we're not selling a good or a service. We're selling a solution to a problem that somebody has. Okay? So these 2 points from the story should give you the permission that you need in order to move forward after you've been told, no, it's not rude or disrespectful. You're doing somebody a service. And that's why I believe it's our responsibility. Okay? So earlier I said, people say no when you lack knowledge on a matter. I want to give you a great quote to remember that moving forward, and it ties in with the story. The quote is from a sales hero of mine named Zig Ziglar, and it's, when people say no, it's because they don't know enough yet to say yes. Okay, one more time. When people say no, it's because they don't know enough yet to say yes. And you can remember that by thinking about my shoe story. I shut Brian down because I didn't know enough yet about how those shoes would impact my life to say yes. And this goes way bigger than shoes, by the way, whatever we're doing in life. You're empowering with someone with the right knowledge to make the right decision, and you are selling or providing a solution to a problem that they have. All right, there's our foundation. Now you can build forward with the 3 tips to get past a no. The first tip is repeating the objection back to the person in the form of a question. So let's use an example of you're trying to get a raise from your boss. You ask your boss for the raise. Boss says, we can't give you a raise right now. All right, there's nothing you can use from there. He just shuts you down. He or she shuts you down. We can't give you a raise right now. And that's where most people say, hey, thanks, I appreciate it. Maybe we can talk about this again later, right? That's weak. You can move forward. You can move forward, and here's how. Repeating the objection back in the form of a question. Looks like this. Sorry, Jake, we can't give you a raise right now. Oh, you can't give me a raise right now? So what you're doing through that is using your body language and tonality. You're letting the person know that you need more information, right? And once you put that ball back in their court, they will feel the need to justify what they said with a deeper reason, okay? So it would probably look something like this. Again, this is a fictional example, but I think you get the idea. You ask for the raise. Sorry, Jake, we can't give you a raise right now. You can't give me a raise right now? Unfortunately not. We opened those new branches last quarter, and because of that, our expenditures are higher than normal. But hey, we can have this conversation again in a few months when things settle down. All right. So what you've done here is got more information that you can use. And actually now, with that example, you've got 2 routes to take, right? First one is you can now make the argument that now is a more important time than ever for the company to take care of its people because there's more on the line with the new branches that it just opened, right? Like that's key. The second point that you could make is, or at least now, you've got an opportunity to chat about this again in a month or 2, right? That any of those are better than just shutting down and walking away, okay? So you're repeating the objection back to them in the form of a question. The second tip is asking for more information using a 2-part question. So the first part is associated with the problem. The second part is associated with the solution. It looks like this. Sorry, Jake, we can't give you a raise right now. Here's part 1. Oh, I completely get that. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that are preventing the raise from happening? Okay, that's the problem. Part 2. I'm just asking because I'd love to know if there's anything I can do on my end in order for you to feel more comfortable approving the raise. That's the solution. So the key here is to leave the decision maker out of the first sentence. That's your boss in this example, right? Because you're addressing the problem. Hey, just out of curiosity, what's preventing the raise from happening? Notice how it didn't say, what's preventing you from giving me the raise? That's confrontational, okay? We don't want to create a win-lose situation. Leave your boss or the decision maker out of that part of the question. I'm just curious, or just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that are preventing X from happening? Okay, now the second piece, you bring them back in, right? Because you want to arrive at the solution together, creating a win-win situation. So part 1, hey, just out of curiosity, what are some of the other things that are preventing X from happening? I'm just asking because I'd love to know if there's anything I can do on my end in order for you to feel more comfortable approving X. Right? So you've strategically brought them into the second part of the question because that's identifying them with the solution, and the two of you arrive there together. So recap, you've got repeating the objection back in the form of a question, and the second one is asking for more information using a 2-part question. Also, I think if you've done a good job of building rapport, during your conversation up to this part, you've got a pretty good chance of getting an authentic or genuine response from them when you ask, hey, what's preventing from X, from happening? So keep that in mind as well. The third tip is something that I call the pause reset method, and that name is derived from the fact that it involves pausing and then resetting. So this is something that I probably use the most often, and it's a tip that I use when I've been given a specific objection. The first 2 are designed to help you when the objection is vague, right? Like you've been given something that you can't work with and you need more information. This last one will help you when you've been given a specific objection. Here's an example. You are trying to work with a new potential client, and they tell you that they're just not really comfortable with you right now because they don't work with vendors they've just met, or they'd like to further develop a relationship with you, whatever the case may be. I think this is pretty realistic. Most of us have encountered something like that. Well, many salespeople or whatever you're doing at the time are probably inclined to just say, okay, thanks. Hey, I totally get that, and I would do the same if I were in your shoes. Let's go ahead and put something on the calendar for a month from now. This is weak, right? Like we could get past this today. You don't have to wait. Like there are ways to get past it today, and this is where the pause reset method comes into play. So you've just been told a specific objection. Let's say it's because they don't know you well enough. They want to have a relationship with you first. Pause your whole process, okay? Do not keep going. Do not try to offer up some quick fix and then close again because you read that in a book somewhere. Pause. Up until this point, they've given you their time, right? They agreed to meet with you. They've listened to you. They've given you their time. So out of respect, this is where you give them your time. Pause here. Now, take some time to reinforce that weak area. If they said they weren't comfortable with your brand because they weren't familiar with your brand, take some time to change the subject for a little bit and then circle back to talking about the brand. Or if they weren't comfortable with your product or whatever it was, take some time to reinforce that weak area. And then you want to reset. And what I mean by resetting is you can't just, if you made it all the way to the end of the process and they told you they weren't comfortable with you, you can't just take 3 to 5 minutes and talking about you and then try to wrap up real quick. You need to reset all the way back to the beginning of the entire interaction. Here's why. Picture yourself going to a car dealership and you encounter what you believe is like a sleazy car salesman or something. All right. If you can't trust him or feel like you can't trust him, then you'll be wondering if you can even trust what comes out of his mouth for the entire test drive, right? And it wouldn't even matter if he's giving you true and accurate information during the test drive. Like you've mentally checked out because you feel like you can't trust this person. That's exactly what's happening here, right? If they said that they weren't comfortable with you, that discomfort clicked immediately for them when you first met, right? And what happened then was that they mentally checked out. And so all of the information and all of the value that you spent time creating and building over the course of maybe a couple minutes or a couple hours, they weren't there for it. They were mentally tuned out because they weren't even comfortable with you from the get-go. So this is why it's important to reset all the way back, or reset to whatever point is necessary. So, normally we'll talk about ourselves first, then maybe our company next, and then maybe the product last, right? Or service that you're offering. So if it came down to the fact that they weren't comfortable with your product, you only have to reset to there. If they weren't comfortable with your company, then you're resetting back to there. And if it's you, all the way back to the beginning. Then you've got to go through everything again. All right, so altogether, those 3 tips. We've got repeating the objection back to them in the form of a question. We've got asking for more information through a 2-part question. And then we've got the pause reset method. I really hope that these have been helpful and insightful for you. Also, I'd love to know how it goes. If you try one of these out, please keep me in the loop. You can DM me right on Instagram at It's Jake Savage. That's also where you can find more content on influence, leadership, and growth. But yeah, feel free to DM me straight on Instagram at It's Jake Savage. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Again, if you liked the episode today, please subscribe. And if you really like it, tell somebody around you who has a pulse. Thanks. All right, today's question comes from Jordan T. out in Austin, Texas. He says, I've noticed that you ask everyone that you interview if they ever wake up in the morning and don't feel like doing what they do. That's my question for you. Do you ever wake up and not want to lead the company you're the president of, or wake up and not want to host Grow Savagely? This is a good question. And I love asking people it just because I think it helps give us some insight into what's happening internally within leaders. But my answer is no. I don't ever wake up and not feel like leading the team at Basemakers, and I don't wake up and not feel like hosting Grow Savagely. I do wake up at times in a negative headspace, thinking that I'm not fit for the job, or I shouldn't be running a podcast, or whatever it is, but I don't ever wake up and not feel like it. And I think that's for one sole reason. Nowadays, what I'm doing in my life is very in line with who I am as a person. And I think that's what keeps me motivated. They're in sync. And I think it's only when you're spending time doing something that isn't in line with who you are as a person is when you start to lose steam and lose motivation. And if that's the way that you feel, or if anybody feels, I would encourage you to consider maybe looking into something else that is more in line with your character, your personality. Right? Because one of the worst things that can happen to us is for us to wake up each morning and not feel like getting after it, or not feel like doing what we were created to do. So the answer is no. Thanks for asking, Jordan Trent. Appreciate it. And if anybody else has a question, feel free to send it over through Instagram at It's Jake Savage, or you can use the hashtag Grow Savagely. Thanks.